As many of you guys know, I am a diehard Mizzou football fan, but I've also always loved the Tennessee Volunteers. Back in 2021 when they hired Josh Heupel, I thought it was a big time hire, and I thought he would turn Tennessee around. That is exactly what he did, as he made a bowl game in year 1, and then in year 2, Tennessee exploded into the college football playoff scene. Ultimately, they ended up missing out on it, but there was a lot of hype in 2023, and there's even more hype going into 2024. In today's video, I want to preview the 2024 Tennessee Volunteers. We're going to go through the expectations for the team, some of the key players, how I think they're going to do overall, and we're also going to do a game-by-game prediction. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and preview the Tennessee Volunteers. So before we talk about 2024, we need to talk about 2023. After a breakout 2022 season, the Volunteers went through a little bit of a rebuilding year. Joe Milton used his final year of eligibility to come back and be the quarterback. They had 3 different big-time running backs, and they sort of had to reload at a couple of key positions. Luckily for Tennessee, though, they still had a pretty good year, as they ended up finishing ranked number 17 in the country, with a 9-4 overall record and a .500 record in the SEC. In Week 1, they beat Virginia 49-13, and also killed Austin Peay in Week 2. Their first loss would come on the road against Florida, and Joe Milton would really struggle in that game, and they would lose 29-16, which was very disappointing. After that, though, they would bounce back, as they beat a good UTSA team, destroyed South Carolina at home, and then beat Texas A&M at home by 7 points. That game was pretty fun to watch. From there, they'd play against Alabama, and while they were actually competitive and in the game for a while, they ultimately lost by 2 touchdowns, losing 34-20. Tennessee was now eliminated from the college football playoff picture, but they still finished with a good season, as they would then go on the road and beat Kentucky and destroy UConn at home 59-3. At this point, things were going pretty smoothly for them, but then they got humbled really quickly. In a game on the road against number 14 Mizzou, they got blasted 36-7, and it was one of Joe Milton's worst games. They also then got killed by Georgia the following week, and now they were 7-4 before they would beat Vanderbilt to finish the regular season at 8-4. They'd get selected to play in the Citrus Bowl, and they'd end up beating number 17 Iowa 35-0. We all knew Iowa was a fluke. In that game, we got to see a glimpse of the future, as both Nico Iamaleava and their new running back Dylan Sampson got a chance to go off in that game. That was a glimpse of the future, but in terms of last year, Joe Milton would finish with 2,800 yards and 20 touchdowns, and he would end up getting drafted. Jalen Wright led the team in rushing with over 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns, and he also got a chance to get drafted. Squirrel White became the number 1 receiver, and both Ramel Keaton and McCallan Castles were near the top in terms of touchdowns. Brew McCoy may have been the most talented receiver on the team, but he suffered that brutal injury, and his season was over before it really began. Overall, the Tennessee offense was a little bit less explosive last year, and the team was not as good as 2022, but still, they won 9 games, and now there's a ton of hype for the future. Now we need to start talking about the roster. The Volunteers ended up sending 3 players to the NFL, as Jalen Wright was drafted to the Miami Dolphins, Joe Milton was drafted to the New England Patriots, and corner Kamal Hadden was drafted to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Vols only had 3 players selected, which was somewhat disappointing, but they brought in a couple of players who I think have an opportunity to make the NFL at some point. In terms of the recruiting class, it was ranked number 13 in the country, and it was headlined by 5-star edge rusher Jordan Ross from Birmingham, Alabama. He's a guy who I'm really excited to watch, and they also grabbed 2 top 100 players who are receivers in Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley. Those guys are going to be absolutely great, and Peyton Lewis is also having a ton of buzz. In terms of their quarterback for the class, they got a 4-star player by the name of Jake Merklinger, and he is someone who's also expected to have a role in the future, potentially after Nico. There are obviously a couple of other players, but they don't really need to be featured. In terms of the transfer portal, the Volunteers ended up picking 9 players from the portal, which included an interesting player in Tommy Winton III, who was a transfer from FCS East Tennessee State, and then they grabbed a defensive lineman from Stanford, former 5-star offensive tackle Lance Hurd from LSU, and then a couple of other highly ranked guys, including 4-star transfer receiver Chris Brazel II from Tulane, and Jalen McMurray, a corner from Temple. Probably the most noteworthy transfer they grabbed was Holden Stays, as he was a tight end from Notre Dame. And overall, I'm actually pretty impressed with their class, and Jermon McCoy from Oregon State is a guy who I think is really going under the radar. So in terms of the quarterback position, it's going to be Nico. Nico was a 5-star recruit in the class of 2023, and he blew up in their bowl game, and everyone thinks is the next big thing. Nico's a guy who could be a generational talent for the Vols, and could blow up right away into a top 5 quarterback in the SEC. Right now, for the most part, it's all hype, but I think he's going to hit and be even better than Joe Milton was. Behind him is obviously true freshman Jake Merklinger, the 4-star player, and then moving over to running back, this is where things get a little bit interesting. They ended up losing both Jabari Small and Jalen Wright to the NFL, and Dylan Sampson is my guy to step up. He led the team in touchdowns last year, and Sampson could be an all-SEC first or second team running back in my eyes, and in my opinion is the second best offensive player on the team behind Nico. They also have Peyton Lewis and Khalifa Keith. Those are two other guys who I expect to play, and then if those two don't work out, they also have Cam Seldon. In terms of the wide receiver spot, I'm actually really excited for this group. At the slot, they're obviously going to have Squirrel White, who was the leading receiver from last year's team, but I think he'll end up being the second or third option by the time the season is over. The other three guys I really want to focus some attention on are one, Brew McCoy. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, and has always shown glimpses of being the next big thing for the Vols, but he got hurt last year. I think in his final year of eligibility, he'll be an 1,000-yard receiver with over 10 touchdowns, and play his way into day 2 of the NFL Draft. I'm really excited for McCoy, and from there, you also have Dante Thornton, who is a really hyped up guy at Oregon, and then obviously you have Chris Brazzell II, who is a transfer from Tulane, who is productive there. You also can't forget their true freshman Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley, and I think those 6 guys are going to be the main receivers, and anyone else will be somewhat of a surprise and isn't really worth mentioning in the video. At tight end, I think it's going to be both Ethan Davis and Holden Stays, as Stays probably has the highest ceiling of any of those players, but Davis I think has the best chance to play right away. In terms of the offensive line, left tackle should be Lance Hurd, left guard should be Andrej Karic, center should be Cooper Mays, right guard should be Javontes Spraggins, and right tackle should be John Campbell Jr. I'm actually pretty impressed with this offensive line, and I think they're going to be one of the better units in the SEC, and will really help this offense. In terms of the defense, the nose tackle should be Omari Thomas, defensive tackle should be Bryson Eason, and both the edge rushers should be James Pierce Jr. and Dominic Bailey. In terms of the linebacker position, I think Keelan Peely will start at the Mike spot, Arion Carter will start at the Sam spot, and then in the secondary, you're going to have Jermon McCoy, the transfer from Oregon State, and then Temple transfer Jalen McMurray. Finally, at the 2 safety positions, you should have Jacoby Thomas and Boo Carter. Obviously, I don't know as much about the defense as the offense, but this is a unit that I think will be able to compete in the SEC, and there are a couple players I'm really excited to watch, and someone who I want to keep my eyes on is Chandavian Bradley, who was a big-time recruit at one point, who I think has the potential to be a monster on the defensive line. We're really just going to have to wait and see, though. Now we're going to get to everybody's favorite part of the preview videos, and try to go through each and every game and make a prediction for the Vols. In Week 1, they're going to play against Chattanooga at home, and if that game's close, Tennessee's in trouble. Mark them at 1-0. In Week 2, they have a really interesting game, as they're going to play NC State on a neutral site. The Wolfpack finished last year strong, and they brought in a couple of big players, including Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina, so NC State has an opportunity to be a really good team and near the top of the ACC, so I think this is actually going to be a really good game. While the Wolfpack are obviously great, they have had a tendency to start out slow the last few years, so I think Tennessee wins this game, and with this game being on ABC, it should be a memorable one. In Week 3, they come back home to play against Kent State, and mark that down as a win. In Week 4, they end up playing Oklahoma in SEC play, which is really weird, and the last time they played Oklahoma was in that awesome home-and-home series with Baker Mayfield. They'll end up going on the road to the Sooners, and I don't really know what to make of this year's Sooners team, to be honest. I like Jackson Arnold, and I like Gavin Sawchuk, but Oklahoma was a little bit off last year in my eyes, and there's a lot of what-ifs. Still though, Oklahoma is an elite team, and they have a really good coach in Brent Venables, plus they're at home, so I'm going to say they beat Tennessee in a nail-biter. This puts the Vols at 3-1. From there, they go on the road to play against Arkansas, and at this time, Sam Pittman will likely be fighting for his job. I don't think that'll be enough though, as I think Tennessee wins that game pretty comfortably and advances to 4-1. After that, they'll play against the Florida Gators at home, and after last year's game, Tennessee has that one marked on their calendars, and I think they come out and destroy Florida. I'm not super high on the Gators this year, and this will now move Tennessee to 5-1. From there, they'll play at home against Alabama, and while I really don't know what to make of New Alabama under Kalen DeBoer, but I'm probably going to err on the side that they're not going to be as good as they were under Saban. I really wasn't that impressed with last year's Alabama team, and they lost a couple of key players, and have a new coaching change, plus with this game being at home, and Tennessee having a ton of momentum, I actually think Tennessee beats Bama this year in another close one. That continues to make Tennessee football off to a great start this year, and after that, they have 2 home matchups against Kentucky and Mississippi State. In my eyes, Kentucky's way more of a trap game than Mississippi State, as we really don't know what to make out of Jeff Lebby's new Bulldogs, but Kentucky's definitely a consistent team, and they'll be playing the same style they've done for the last 8 years, and this game should be competitive. But I think Tennessee is the better team here, and they will beat both Kentucky and Mississippi State at home, and conclude that 3-game road trip. While at this point Tennessee will be in the playoff hunt, things are going to get a little bit interesting as they now have to go on the road to play against Georgia. Georgia, in my eyes, is the best team in the SEC, and I've learned not to count them out, so Georgia probably wins this game by 2 or 3 or 4 touchdowns. That's just the reality of how they've been playing lately. That'll give Tennessee their second loss, but luckily to finish the year, they'll beat UTEP at home, and then they'll go on the road and beat Vanderbilt. That gives Tennessee a 10-2 record, with losses to both Oklahoma and Georgia. That'd give them 2 conference losses, and this second tier of teams in the SEC will be really interesting. Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Mizzou, and Tennessee, I all expect to be fighting for a college football playoff spot, and Tennessee may or may not get in. Now that we actually have more teams in the bracket, it's going to be a lot more fun, and there's going to be a lot more chaos, and Tennessee's one of those teams I think will be on the bubble. I really don't know if I really don't know how to make a prediction for this, but I'm going to say that Tennessee just misses out on the playoff appearance. Doing a quick relook over the schedule, the biggest game I think is that NC State matchup. If they win that game under the lights at night against a good Wolfpack team, I think they'll then cruise to have a good season. But if they lose that one, the momentum's going to be a little bit off, and they'll likely be 2-2 after that Oklahoma matchup. From there, I think Alabama, Kentucky, and Georgia are the 3 hardest games left on the schedule, and as I said, I think they win 2 of them. Tennessee, in my eyes, will go between 9-4 and 11-2, and my official prediction is they go 10-2 in the regular season. Nico becomes one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, Dylan Sampson dominates on the ground, and Tennessee bounces back and wins 1 more game than last year. That's just my opinion though, and be sure to let me know down below. If you're a Tennessee fan, what do you think of this year's Vols team? What do you think of my roster preview? How do you think they'll do? And what do they get right and wrong? Be sure to let me know down below. Let me know what team I should cover next. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.